Bedtime stories for adults. If, like me, some of your fondest memories are of being tucked in and hearing a favorite story as you drifted off to sleep, you'll love this channel. Here, you'll find gentle bedtime readings of my own books, narrated by my assistant May, in a soft, soothing voice designed to help you relax. No jarring sound effects, no sudden noises, just calm, feel good stories to ease you into sleep. If you enjoy these stories and would like to support the channel, you can also find all of my books available on Amazon. We finished moving the house around, and everything was looking pretty good, if not a little cramped. Afterwards, sitting and having an ale with Dad, I was mentioning how most things here were so similar to home. The shops, the store clerks, most of the people I've met. You've probably got a cheap old man who tries to buy half ales at the Pig and Whistle living upstairs here, I said with a laugh as I sipped my ale. There is an old man, son, but he only moved in about 2 months ago. Poor bugger. When I talked to him, he said his son was a Kingsguard also who died. Logan, I think he said his name was. I stood and looked at my father. James Logan, I asked. The name of his dead son. Yeah? Dad said curiously. I put down my mug and pulled my sword, and walking out, I said, He's not dead, Dad. He's one of my assassins. I ran out the front door and up the side steps and kicked in his door, a single candle still burning on his nightstand and the fire in his fireplace dying. Walking over to him, sleeping in his bed, I picked him up and held him in the air with one hand while holding my sword to his throat with the other. Where is your son? I ordered. What? Who? What's going on? He stammered, waking and realizing his peril. Your son, old man. I'm not playing games. Where is he? I ordered again. Just then Dad appeared in the doorway with his sword drawn. Captain Zart? Help, please, the old man begged. I think you better answer his questions, Logan. My father said. He looked down into my face, then at the sword to his neck, then at me again, and nodded. Slowly, I put him down on the floor, but held my sword to his neck. Your son, I ordered. Slowly, he raised one arm and pointed across the room to a table with a pitcher and basin. Water. Sir, please, he begged. I figured with my dad at the door, and with him being an old man, and also this may be a long story, it was not too much of a request. Get your water, then talk, I said firmly. Slowly, he walked over to the basin and shaking poured his water and drank it, and keeping his back to us. So, Sergeant, you finally figured it out, said the old man, whose voice, size, and shape changed to that of a much younger, much fitter man, as he spoke. You found me this time, but no matter. The girl is useless. You will not find me again. Logan said as I lunged at him with my sword, and a porthole appeared beside him and swallowed him whole. Fuck! I yelled, shaking with anger over my stupidity. My father shook his head, came up behind me. Well, son, if I didn't believe you before, I do now. At least you know Nimicie is safe, he said, trying to calm me down. No, that's what he wants me to believe, so I'll stop my pursuit of him, I said, throwing the cup he drank from into the fire. I turned to my father and said, Dad, grab Nimicie's clothes and meet me at the palace, please, I asked as I started running out the door. We move her tonight, I said, taking off as fast as I could. Arriving at the palace, I stopped running to avoid attention and got to Valdor's chambers as soon as I could. Knocking and getting no answer, I walked in. To my great relief, Valdor and Nimicie were working on some type of magic together, with a blue ball of light showing pictures between them. I interrupted by bursting into the room through the open door, saying, Thank God you two are okay, I said. They both broke their concentration, and the ball went away. I just found Logan, and he jumped realms before I could kill him, I said and continued. He is a shapeshifter now. Where? They both asked in unison. The apartment above my father's place. Like, believe it or not, he was disguised as an old man. When I confronted him on something my father said, he turned into a young man and escaped through a porthole. Nimicie, the man or men who were beating you, did you recognize him or them, I asked. Only one. It was Sir Kaby. The other I didn't know, but he had glowing green eyes. His pendant must have broken and he was consumed by the fel, Valdor said. I nodded. Valdor, do you have that bracer here? I asked, putting my hand on his shoulder. No, both pieces are in my secret spot under the stairs, he said. Well, then let's go. Nimicie, stay here. My father's coming with your clothes. You're coming home tonight, I said, heading for the door. Your father's here? And hold on. Son, I have something all of us will be interested in, Dad said, holding up a book in one hand and Nimicie's packages in the other. Dad gave Nimicie her packages, and she scooted off behind Valdor's privacy screen, obviously feeling much better. Then Dad came over to us. I found this in the old man's nightstand. Looks like a diary, but I can't read it. It's in a language I've never seen, Dad said and handed it to Valdor. It's in Zandali, an ancient troll language, Valdor said. Can you read it? I asked. I may be a bit rusty, but for the most part, yes, Valdor said, looking through the handwritten book. Then from behind the screen, Oh, Dawn, you shouldn't have. Nimicie yelled with delight. What color were the ribbons on those packages, Dad? I asked him. Pink, I think, he said back. I shook my head and said, Wrong packages. Sweetheart, that was meant as a gift for when you got better. Dad grabbed the wrong packages, I said. A moment of silence, then from behind the screen, Thank you, Dad. Ah, I'm off the hook, Dad said, chuckling. Nimicie came out. Well, boys, how do I look? She asked. Standing there in her skin-tight black huntress outfit that hugged every curve, and new bow and arrows across her back, she looked dangerous and erotic all at the same time. A collective. Wow, escaped our lips looking at her. Great. Now how are we going to get her out of the palace looking like that? I asked. Dad ran behind the screen and grabbed the pink ribbons from the packages and made a sash, then came out and asked Nimicie to hold out one arm as he looped it through and over her head, letting the sash hang off her from left to right. Then smiled at me and said, Happy name day, son. I am not pretending my girlfriend's a stripper, I said. Nimicie ran across the room and jumped in my arms and started singing. Happy name day to you. Dad and Valdor both put their hands on my shoulders, pushing me out the door with Nimicie in my arms, and joined in the singing. 6 courses later, and each acting drunker and louder than the last, and we were out of the palace. Walking back to Dad's with Nimicie still in my arms, she said, You know, I can walk. I know, I said and smiled and continued to carry her. Well, your holiness, looks like you get your bed back tonight, my father said to Valdor with a smile. And just in time too, Captain. My back was suing me for divorce, Valdor said, and we all chuckled. Arriving, Dad opened the door and invited everyone in. Valdor went in. Next was supposed to be Nimicie, and I and Nimicie put her leg out, stopping us. Tell me, Mr. Zart, is it your intent never to buy us a home of our own? You're about to carry me over your father's threshold, she said, smiling at me. So I dropped her and stepped over her, saying, I will buy us any house you want after I put a ring on your finger. Did you just drop your girlfriend? My father asked disapprovingly. Yes, on her double-stitched padded butt, I said back disapprovingly, and he went back to pouring everyone ales. Are these steaks for anyone? I haven't eaten all day, Valdor asked. Help yourself, my friend, I said. Valdor nodded, took a steak, and put the other on a plate for Nimicie, and took it to her as she looked through her other packages on the bed. Eat, girl, he said, leaving the plate beside her and heading for an ale by my father. Just a quick bath, gentlemen, and I'll be right out. Will you hold the book reading, please? Nimicie asked, and disappeared into the bathroom with an armful of clothes. I pushed a reading chair by the fire for light. Here, Valdor, sit here for light, I said, and went and joined Dad at the picnic-type dining table. And while we drank our ale and chatted, Valdor ate his steak and read through the book to himself. With everyone back in the living room, Dad, Nimicie, and myself sat at the table sipping our ale, and Nimicie eating her steak as Valdor pieced together the diary the best he could, partly because his Zandali was rusty, and partly because it was obviously written by a man insane with fell magic. But it told of a realm where the Alliance had lost, and the whole planet was Horde, a race born for battle, squabbling and fighting amongst themselves. Logan's plans were to learn the secrets of the pendants and use that to become the leader of the planet, raiding other realms, and taking all the fell magic within that realm, then collapse the realm till there remained only one with him as a god, consumed in fell magic. They kidnapped Nimicie first, for she was the oldest of her 3 sisters, and had the best chance of remembering her father's study and the things she'd see within it, maybe even the journal itself. Her father's spirit, which Logan had captured just before he died, and keeps in a purgatory of fell magic, refuses to tell him anything, even with threats of brutal torture of his children. It's gotta drain a lot of fell magic to keep a purgatory going this many years. I wonder where he's getting it from? Valdor said out loud. My poor father, so that's where he calls to me from, Nimicie said with tears in her eyes. We know now, we can help now, and we're on it, I said gently to Nimicie, putting my arm around her. Valdor, does it say where he might have gone? I asked. No. The last 4 pages wrote are a series of 3 sets of numbers, then 2 initials, Valdor said, flipping through the book. There's a Zandali dictionary in my library back at the palace. You can have it, son, Dad said. I nodded in thanks. Well, I'm off to the palace, Captain. Might I have permission to go into your office and grab that book tonight? Valdor asked, and Dad nodded. And Nimicie, remember what I taught you today? It can also be used in lucid dreams. But don't tell your father too much. It may not be him. Valdor warned and said good night and left. Well, that's enough action for me for one day, and tomorrow night we have furniture to build. Nimicie, you will come and meet my adopted granddaughter Cindy, won't you? Dad asked. Nimicie looked at me. It's a long story, I'll fill you in tonight, I said with a smile. Looking at my father, Nimicie said, I'd love to, Dad. Dad, I like that. Son, you put a ring on this lady's finger. Soon, Dad said, shaking his finger at me. I will, Dad. Good night, I said. Good night, kids. As he went and laid on his bed and was snoring in seconds. We talked for a while and kissed, and Nimicie grabbed my hands and headed over to the bed. I'm not sure we're ready. Are you not still healing? I asked. All right. Sleep on the floor. I thought you'd like to cuddle and be comfortable, but suit yourself, she said. Nimicie took off her robe. Under was a short black sheer sleeping dress. She hung her robe on the bedpost, got under the covers, and blew out the candle. In the dark, I stripped down to my boxers and jumped in the bed behind her and got under the covers. Why, Mr. Zart? Are you accustomed to jumping into a lady's bed in the dark? Nimicie asked as she slid closer to me, and before I could answer, kissed me. We would make love that night for the first time. Very slowly and carefully, and with nothing more for romantic music, the rhythm of my father snoring. It was the best night of my life. I awoke to the smell of beans. Up, you two, we're burning daylight, Dad said, as he scooped out 3 plates of beans and put the pot back over the fire. I popped out of bed and put my pants on and headed for the bathroom to wash up. So that's where I got that saying. From you, Dad, I said in passing. Been saying it to you since you were 5, son. Dad smiled and said as he sat to eat his beans. Nimicie got her robe on and came and sat beside Dad and kissed him on his cheek. Morning, Dad, she said with a smile. Beans for breakfast, huh? No fruit or toast? A little bacon? She asked, smiling. Dad laughed and pointed at the fireplace. Hot coffee in the kettle, he said, and went back to his beans. I got dressed and put on my riding pouch and short sword, grabbed a mug of dwarven ale, and sat at the table across from the 2 of them. That, son, is going to stop. You are not having ale in the morning in this house. This is not a campsite. Besides, what would your mother say? Dad said, shaking his spoon at me. Aye, she'd say you be poor and yourself one and know your mother, I said, smiling at Nimicie. Is your mother dwarf? Nimicie asked with a big smile. She is. She was. Dad and I spoke at the same time. Oh, I'm sorry, Dad, I forgot. I apologized. Nimicie, Mom died in this realm, but she's alive and kicking in mine, owns the Zart Ranch in Loch Modan, and somehow, some way I am going to get these 2 together, I said. Well, we'll let your mother decide that one, son. Sure be nice to see her again, Dad said, then pulled out the lock of Mom's hair. I gave him from his pocket and smelled it. Sweet, Beth, Dad said, and then put it away. Over breakfast, we made our plans for the day. Dad would go to the palace and work. I would go see Valdor and see the progress he made. Nick and Nimicie wanted to fix up the house and asked Dad if she could hang some pictures and do a little grocery shopping, then mentioned that since she was going to go to my realm, she quit her job and gave up her apartment. So she asked if I had any money. I showed her the diamonds and told her she didn't have to worry about money, and we'd buy a place a little more private than the city once all this was over. I took 10 gold out of my purse to have pocket money and gave her the rest of my purse, saying, Aye, you be the woman of the house now. Nimicie smiled from ear to ear, then leaned over to Dad and asked, What does that mean? Dad and I laughed, and he said, It means you are in charge. Nimicie got us up, kissed us both, and scooted us out the door. Dad went to his office, and I went and saw Valdor in his office. Valdor, you here? I yelled, going into his office and closing the door. A note on his desk read, "You know where I am." So I took it, ripped it up, and threw it in the trash, then went down to Valdor's secret room. "Ah, Dawn, a new pendant for you," Valdor said and held up a pendant. It was gold and glowing with a blue and white twisted diamond in the middle. "It is made of light and void magic and is very strong. It will allow multiple people to go through the same porthole and even to a small degree time travel, only within a few days, of course. But the good thing is, it can't be tracked by the other two bracers your assassins have," Valdor said, and continued. "I and my counterpart in your realm worked on it all night, and its creation method is only known to us, and only in our heads. Now on to your bracer," Valdor said and handed me the pendant. As I put on the pendant, Valdor went into great detail how the bracer worked, how to tell where and who and what time the last travel was. "It's all a matter of using different combinations of fingers, touching the lines and dots on the map on the bracer. Admittedly, it's going to take some practice, almost like learning how to play guitar," he said with a smile. I thanked him and asked him to explain how to use the new pendant. "Simply concentrate on a place and time and a name of the realm you wish to travel to, and it will appear next to you, and simply step through," he said. "Now put on your bracer and activate it," he said, and I did. "Do you see the green and blue dots almost overlapping each other, leading to the red one?" Valdor asked. "Yes," I said. "Good. Tell me who, when, and where," Valdor said as a test. Holding my left fist in my right palm, I manipulated the fingers on my right hand to get the information. It took a few tries, but I got it. "Logan and KB both traveled to a realm called Hakar at 8 a.m. this morning, but I saw Logan disappear last night around 9:30, I said, confused. "He used a porthole, all right. Just not one associated to the pendant. He has become a powerful wizard," Valdor explained. "Great. Well, at least Nimicie is out of danger for now," I said, "but she does have 2 other sisters. You might want to check on them as well," Valdor said. "I will after I see the king tomorrow," I said. "For now, I'm going to concentrate on that and sorting all that out. Well, Valdor, thank you. I could never have made it here without your help. You are one of my greatest friends, and I'm off to lunch with Dad," I said as I smiled and left. Popping my head in my dad's office, he was about to eat a cup of beans from the commissary when I asked, "Were we supposed to meet for lunch?" Dad put his spoon back in the beans and threw them in the trash. "No, but what you got, son?" he said with a smile. Laughing, I said, "Nothing. Maybe you shouldn't have done that." "Maybe not," he said disappointedly. "Mutton chop at the Pig and Whistle. Do you have time, Dad?" I asked. "I'll get my coat," Dad said, and went to get up. Just then, Nimicie came in with a huge basket. "Oh, the market had so many good sales today, and the lobster at the dock was so fresh and a good price if you bought 5. Sit Boy's lunch is getting cold. Boiled whole lobsters with this dipping sunflower-infused lemon herb and garlic soft butter should still be warm, corn on the cob and sundried tomato bread with a cucumber aioli and beignets for dessert." "Well, dig in, boys," Nimicie said after laying all the food on Dad's desk. "Wait, where is Valdor? I thought you boys ate together?" Nimicie said. "Dawn, would you go get him, please? And hurry, this lunch will not stay fresh long," Nimicie said, tying a lobster bib around Dad. "Yes, Mum," I said and headed out to get Valdor. Valdor came, and we all had a filling and delicious lunch, and I told Nimicie about the new pendant Valdor made and showed it to her around my neck. "How does it work?" Nimicie asked, and Valdor explained all its features over lunch. Then Nimicie stacked all the leftovers on a grateful Valdor as he left, and then she asked if we were heading over to the Davises to work off lunch. "Where is Davis?" I asked. "I haven't seen him at all," I mentioned. "Oh, he's on special assignment at the public library for the next 2 weeks," Dad said, smiling. The 3 of us walked over to the Davises, linked together with my father on the left and the huge basket on his left arm, Nimicie in the middle, linked to the 2 of us and me on the right. We knocked, and Irene invited us in. Nimicie introduced herself as Danny's fiancée and took a bottle of wine out of the basket for the ladies and told us the sandwiches, and 2 wineskins of Al were ours to split with Ernie, then pulled out a jar of homemade peanut brittle. Now I wonder who would like this peanut brittle. Do you have a dog, Irene? Nimicie teased as Cindy got on all fours and started barking. We all started laughing, and Nimicie gave the jar to Cindy, saying, Cindy, I'm Nimicie. I can make all kinds of treats and candies. I hope we can be friends. Cindy hugged Nimicie. At Nimicie, she said, then ran off to share her candy with Grandpa Zart. Then Cindy pulled us down a crowded hallway with 2 bookcases and a desk in it to a room at the end very freshly painted pink. In it, 3 large furniture crates were laced with a mattress on top, an empty bucket of pink paint, and Ernie sitting on a ladder in pajama pants and a tank top, studying in the middle of the room. Daddy Davis spent all morning painting it for me, Cindy said loudly. Seeing us, Ernie put the book on the floor and snapped to attention. My father, still with a mouthful of peanut brittle, went and stood in front of Davis and put his hands behind his back and tapped his foot angrily. Captain, sir, the library is closed today, sir. I thought I'd study at home, sir, Davis said. I knelt beside Cindy and spoke with a smile. Uh-oh, Daddy. Davis is in trouble. Let's watch to see what Grandpa Zart does. Cindy held up her jar of candy for me to take a piece and watch, so I took a small corner piece. Glancing at us watching him, Dad took a long, slow walk around Davis, then walked over to the creates, pointed to the middle one, and stomped his foot. Davis said, Yes, sir, ran over to the create and started taking it apart. Yay! Cindy and I cheered and clapped, and my dad took a bow. I grabbed the ladder, paint, and brushes and moved them into the hall in a safe place, then came in and said, I got the bed, claimed it, for the bed would be the easiest to build. Just my father finally finished his candy, walked over to Cindy. Would you like to help Grandpa put your dollhouse together? Dad asked, and Cindy nodded with a big smile. Then go put away your candy and wash your hands and be back here in 5 minutes. Cindy saluted Grandpa and ran out the door. We all chuckled. The dresser was done, and Ernie was breaking up the packing crates into the usable wood. I was wrong about the bed, for I did not know that it had a working drawbridge on the footboard and a bookcase built into the headboard and drawers underneath. Still, I got off easier than Dad, who had a 7-year-old reading the instructions for him as he tried to build the dollhouse castle. The ladies came in, and Irene said, You boys have hogged Cindy's attention all day, and we'd like to take her for ice cream and shopping. Yay, ice cream! From Cindy. Mutiny in the ranks, Dad said, chuckling. Nimicie came up to me and kissed me and put her arms around my neck. You look good building kids' furniture, she said and smiled. Our kids will not have furniture like this. I can promise you that, I said, smiling. She again kissed me and straightened my collar and took my hand and brought me over between Dad and Ernie and stood in front of us. You boys have 2 skins of ale to share, more than that. Or if we come back and you're hammered, all 3 of you will be answering to me. Got that? Nimicie ordered. We snapped to attention, and Ernie, seeing us, did also. Yes, Mum, Dad and I roared. Nimicie looked at Ernie. Yes, Mum, he said. She nodded and said, Come, Cindy, and held out her hand. Cindy took it, and they all left with Irene saying as they went down the hall, Can you teach me that? What rank does she hold, Captain? Ernie asked. Woman of the house, Dad chuckled. Then we all did. After much teasing, because he bought it, Ernie and I finally gave Dad a hand with the dollhouse and had it together within an hour. Then with the hardware around the house, the last of the pink paint and a few packing create boards, we managed 3 toy shelves. One with a coat hanger bar under it. We managed to fit the desk comfortably back in the corner, and 1 bookshelf in the room before calling it done. The rest, curtains, blankets, and a rug, would be up to the women, and it's what they went shopping for. Or so we thought. Enjoying our sandwiches and ale, we waited in the living room for the ladies to get home. The first one in the house was Cindy, who asked, Is it done? And we all pointed down the hall. She took off like a jackrabbit, a loud scream of joy, and then running back out and leaping on Dad, then me, then her father. Thank you, Grandpa Zart. Then, thank you, Uncle Danny. Then I love you, Daddy. Davis, come to see my room. And Cindy pulled Ernie down the hallway. Just then, Irene came in. Arms full of packages. We got up and helped her, grabbing the package as Irene headed for the couch to take off her shoes. The two in your left hand, Danny and the blue and green one, Grandpa, go to Cindy's room. The rest can stay here, she requested. I loaded Dad up and sent him off, then put down the others beside Irene. School supplies. I've got to get her name stitched, burned, or written into all of it before tomorrow, Irene said, as I smiled and sat, putting her hand to her face. Put down your rug and make your bed, young lady. Packages in the garbage and bags folded in the closet, Irene yelled down the hall. And you boys get out of there and let her work, Irene yelled again. A slam of a door and Dad and Ernie returned. She kicked us out, Ernie said. Because, dear, she was told if she wanted to continue to get nice things, her room was her responsibility. So, no help, Daddy, Grandpa, Danny, Irene said. Yes, Mum. From all of us. And we chuckled. Now come to help me put Cindy Davis on all these supplies. Here, you burn it into the pencil box, Irene said to Ernie. Ernie gave us the smile of a proud father and went and sat by the fire with the pencil box and a poker. I noticed all Davis's study books are on the bookcase in Cindy's room. Was that you? Dad asked, looking at me. If he wants to be a Kingsguard and a father, he better learn stealth, I said, and chuckled. Then asked, Irene, where's Nimicie? She left right after ice cream, said she had errands to do, and I'm to stall you two as long as possible. So dinner, boys? Irene asked. No, thank you, Irene. I think we'll get going. Thank you, though, I said, then continued. Looking at Dad, I said, Uncle, I don't want Nimicie alone in the city by herself. I'll go say goodbye to my granddaughter, Dad grunted, getting up. Do not make her bed. I know a military bed when I see it, Captain, Irene warned as Dad disappeared down the hall. He's going to make her bed, you know, I said, chuckling. As long as he teaches her how. Why are you worried about Nimicie? Seems like she can take care of herself. With those boot knives she wears, Irene asked. It's not Nimicie I'm worried about, I said, smiling. It's the beggar who grabs her arm to ask for copper I'm worried about, I explained. Country girl, Irene said, nodding. Ernie, I said as I went over to shake his hand. You get to those books sometime tonight, I said. He put down the box and poker and took my hand. Thank you, Danny, for everything. I will, Ernie said. Cindy and Grandpa came back out into the living room. Grandpa Zart showed me how to make a bed and bounce a gold piece off it, then gave me the gold piece. Cindy said proudly. Did you learn? Irene asked sternly. Cindy nodded proudly and held out her gold piece in her hand and said, I earned this. We said our goodbyes and Grandpa Zart got another hug and we walked home with my father strutting like a peacock. I couldn't help but chuckle to myself. When we got to the apartment and opened the door, both our jaws hit the floor. Nimicie had a section of the apartment draped off with two huge Kingsguard flags from ceiling to floor, with Dad's bed in the division and all his accolades on the wall over it, beautiful cushions and coverings everywhere. Even a trimmed gold tablecloth and two armchairs facing the fire and above the fire. Mom and Dad's commissioned wedding painting. Where the hell did she find that? From my dad staring right at it. Nimicie, I yelled. Be right out. From the washroom. The place is outstanding, sweetheart, I yelled. She must have found the key to my storage locker. My dad said to himself. Next time ask, young lady. My father yelled, a little annoyed. I no be asking to hang things in my own house, Jonathan Zart, and shame for not having it there in the first place, came a voice from the bathroom. Ha! Ha! You sounded just like... I was interrupted by the bathroom door opening, and there, in the doorway, was my mother with Nimicie standing behind her with her hands on her shoulders. Sweet Beth! My father yelled, his voice cracking as he openly cried, and Mum came running across the room and jumped into his arms, kissing him hard. They stood there, a good 5 minutes, not saying a word, just kissing and looking at each other, then kissing again, Mum's feet dangling just below Dad's waist. Nimicie came waltzing up to me, saying, Your new pendant works great. I was gone for 2 days. And she held it out in front of me. I felt my neck. Thief, I said and chuckled. Nimicie and I sat at the table with 2 owls just watching Mom and Dad cuddled into one armchair and catching up. Sigh, I hope we have that kind of love someday, Nimicie said with a huge smile on her face. We already do, my love, I said and took her hand and kissed it. So how? I asked. Oh, can we move to your father's bed and let them have the big one tonight? I'm beat, and it's a long story. We went over to the bed and sat, and Nimicie pulled the flags closed, which gave a surprising amount of room around the bed and night table. Then sat on the bed and stuck her foot in the air looking at me with a sad face, so I'd pull her boots off. I did and sat on the bed massaging her feet as she started her story. After stealing your pendant and ice cream, I made my excuses and did try to give Irene money for shopping, but she wouldn't take it. Then ran back here, changed into my huntress suit, and used the pendant. Mostly I learned how from what Valdor said over lunch, but also when he taught me how to mind, project my thoughts. I may have peeked a bit into his mind too. Just enough to know about your pendant and how it would work, and his favorite food, lobster. So yes, the lunch was a bit of a setup, but went off well, I'd say. Then through the porthole and ended up in Stormwind, though. I was thinking Lochmodan, but I guess you were on my mind from previous jumps. So the tram from Stormwind to Ironforge, then a griffin to Lochmodan. Then coming out of the griffin station, I was called to by name by a night elf trader named Calsor, who said he knew you and was going right by the Zart Ranch if I needed a lift. I took the ride and had a pleasant chat and got off at the ranch and knocked on the door for your mother, who wasn't around. I went around back and found her by a still. I told her who I was and why I was there to take her to her husband. She went inside and came out with a shotgun, called me a witch, and ordered me off the ranch. I begged for her to listen to me as I backed up with her holding the shotgun to my belly in a last chance effort. I pulled out the pendant and thought of you. And there you were beside your father, building a dollhouse. She stopped, put down the shotgun, and started crying, saying, "Me sweet soldier boy Johnny is alive?" I told her everything and asked her if she'd like to come to live here in this realm, and she ran in the house, dropping the shotgun in the dirt. Slowly and cautiously I followed her in the house, and she had a steamer trunk on the table and was throwing stuff in it. I told her what she took would have to be small and then told her about your trick with the diamonds. We spent most of the day digging up clay pots of gold around the ranch as your mother tried to remember where they all were. That night, she signed over the deed to the ranch to your ward, Kylie, and had it in the mail the next morning. It took us most of today to get to the bank and jewelry store in Stormwind, so after her business, we went back to your place in Stormwind and got ready to leap. Only it was tomorrow, and you and your father were in front of the king. So I thought back to being at the Davises, and we leaped into their living room and snuck out. But we managed to get back here with 3 times the amount of diamonds you have just about an hour before you showed up. And did I tell you? She dragged that painting with us. Chapter 26. I awoke and got on my pants and kissed Nimicie. "Good morning," I whispered, not knowing if my parents were awake. She groaned and pulled the blanket over her head. I smiled and turned to step out of the curtained-off room, then thought better. "Knock, knock. I'm coming out," I said loudly. "Come ahead, son. We're just having breakfast." My father's voice from the other side of the curtain. I came out and went and washed up, then joined them for breakfast. "Where's your woman?" my mother asked. "Still sleeping. You wore her out, Mom. Might have something to do with a shotgun pushed into her middle," I said sternly. With that crazy outfit and getting off a night elf's cart, I thought it'd be a scam for sure," she said and nodded. "Sweet Beth," Dad said disapprovingly. "You no be there, Johnny." Mom said and kissed Dad's hand. Just then Nimicie came out, still wrapped in her blanket, kissed Mom and Dad on the cheek, and flopped beside me, leaning on me, saying, "Stop picking on your mother," and nuzzled her head into my shoulder. "Well, know that everyone's awake. I can be putting on the bacon and coffee," Mom said. Nimicie sat up. "Bacon," she said, and tossed the blanket to the ground, still wearing her huntress outfit. And melon and cottage cheese and bread," Mom said, heading to the fire to put on the bacon and coffee. "I love you, Mrs. Zart," Nimicie said, grabbing some melon. No, you best be calling me Mum if you're going to be sleeping with me, son," Mom said. Nimicie picked up her melon, walked over to Mom, leaned over, and kissed her on the cheek. "I love you, Mum," she said with a smile, and came back to the table. Dad took her hand as she sat and kissed it, saying, "Once again, I am in your debt, daughter." "Have you thought about what you're going to say to the king today, son?" my father asked. "I'm just going to tell him all of it, the whole truth," I said, eating some melon. "Just the same, son, I'm going to gather everyone you've had contact with since you've been here as character witnesses," Dad said. I'm going, Nimicie said. Me too, from Mom. And I'll get Valdor and the Davises as well, Dad said and continued. Sweet Beth, you'll meet Cindy. Dad turned and smiled at his wife. Aye, oh, the poor wee lass, does she know you killed her, Don? No, all three of us thundered. Mom nodded and went back to the bacon. He was a bad man, Mum. Now she's with a loving family, I said, looking for my mother's forgiveness, and she gave it with one simple word. Aye, Mom said, and brought over the bacon and coffee, putting the first 3 slices on Nimicie's plate. Watching, I smiled and looked at my father. We've been tossed to the trash, da? And smiling back and doing his best dwarf said, Aye, 'tis a great sad day. And we laughed. Nimicie, this place is a little small for the 4 of us. Do you think we have enough in the budget to get in an apartment if we can find one? I asked. Before she could answer, Dad spoke up. Hold off on that, son, your mother, and I would like to share something, he said. Mom came over and stood beside him and kissed his hand. We were talking last night, and after you see the king, and if everything goes well, I'm going to retire, and we are going to go buy and rebuild the Zart Ranch, minus the funeral carriage, Dad announced. Last time I was out that way was a few years ago, but the land was for sale, and if not there, a few miles down the road, Dad said. We'll pack up and be out of here within a week, so this place will be available, and my rent is paid for the rest of the year. Dad reached into his pocket. Here, son, your diamond's back, and if it's okay by you two, we thought we'd ask the Davises to be our permanent guests there. With Ernie at the academy for 4 years, a ranch would be a perfect place for Cindy to grow up. My father finished speaking, but had a worried look in his eye to what I might say. I looked at Nimicie, who had a smile from ear to ear, and nodded at me. I took Nimicie's hand and said, Mom, Dad, we are both so proud to have such kind and loving parents, to be part of a family that extends itself to strangers so easily and freely. I hope someday, Nimicie, and I will have the opportunity to follow in your example. You both make me so proud. I said with a tear in my eye. Nimicie kissed me. Well said, my love, she said, drying my eye. And this time me soldier boy Johnny is going to die in me arms, and no on some bloody field, Mom said, wrapping her arms around him. Not too soon, I hope, sweet Beth, Dad said, chuckling. He then kissed her and said, One more thing, son. Then he got up, went into the bathroom, and came out with a neatly folded parade uniform and handed it to me. I don't know about your realm, but there is no mandatory retirement here. You may want to wear that when we see the king, he said, smiling. I unfolded the uniform. Sergeant Major, I said, astounded. I promoted you, son, if the king reinstates you. If not, no harm, no foul, Dad said, smiling. I'm getting worried, Dawn. Maybe you should let me hold the pendant? Nimicie suggested. No, Nimicie, for any wrath that might befall me would surely befall the pendant wearer as well, I said, and took and kissed her hand. And I'm not sure I like your idea of character witnesses either, Dad, I said. The king may be surly, but he is a fair man. I'll note your objection to the people I ask, but I'm sure it won't stop them, Dad said. Anyway, son, you get ready. I have errands to run. When I get back, we'll march to the palace shoulder to shoulder, Dad said proudly. He kissed his wife goodbye and said, If all goes well today, sweet Beth, I'll be needing a good set of buckskins. Shopping tonight, my love? She nodded and slapped him hard on the ass as he left. He won't get more pay if you disable him, Mum, I said, laughing and eating my bacon. He's a man. He can take it. Mom said, smiling as she sat at the table to eat her breakfast. With Mom and Nimicie laughing and carrying on, doing the breakfast dishes in the bathroom. I put on my uniform and short sword and buffed my boots and buckles to a high polish. As I was giving myself the once-over in the mirror when the ladies came in, Mom put the plates on the corner of the table, came over to me, and reached up, placing her hand on my cheek. Just like your father, she said with such pride in her voice. You do clean up well. Nimicie chuckled and came over and kissed me. But something's missing, she said. I haven't put on my armor yet, I said, smiling. No, that's not it. Your medals. You had a chest full of medals when I first saw you, she said, shaking her finger. Oh, I'm sure Dad will have a few in his desk I could borrow. He is the barracks captain and gives out the promotions, I said. Oh, and Dawn, don't wear your armor. I don't know why, but something is telling me you shouldn't. Nimicie asked. I have learned to listen to premonitions, so it was not hard for me to honor Nimicie's request. Too hot of a day for armor anyway, I thought to myself, justifying her premonition. Nimicie and Mom both got dressed in their best outfits, and when Dad came back, we all headed to the palace together. Going directly to Dad's office, everyone was there. Valdor, the Davises, and even Cindy. Which surprised me, and I called Ernie over to speak quietly with him. Ernie, are you sure you want your daughter here for this? She may learn some disturbing things? I asked. We had a long talk. I even went back to the orphanage to get the toy bear as a memento for her, but she does not want it. She knows that you killed her daddy saving Aunt Nimicie, Ernie said proudly, and put his hand on my shoulder. She also knows you are Uncle Donnie, thanks to your father this morning. Dad took the great pleasure of introducing Mom to everyone, and Mom was surprised to see Valdor here and went and hugged him, much to his surprise and my father's horror. It took us all a bit to explain to Mom. They were from different realms. You will be at the ranch for Winter's Festival, won't you, Mr. Valdor? You have for the past 15 years. I no expect that to change. Still a 36 long, love lobster, and have a fondness for me homemade dwarven ale? Mom asked Valdor. Thank you, Mrs. Zart. I believe I will, Valdor said, smiling. Oh, would you listen to Beth, please, Mr. Valdor, Mom said, and we all had a chuckle. I went over to Cindy and knelt beside her. Sweetie, you may hear some bad things about Uncle Donnie. I just want you to know. I'm sorry, I said, looking into her eyes. She wrapped her arms around me. I love you, Uncle Donnie, she said. And that was enough. I knew I did right by her, and a great weight was lifted from me. Mom came over to Cindy, who was just a bit shorter than her, brushed her hair from her eyes and took her hands and said, Do you like woolly sheep and horses, climbing trees and chasing butterflies? We darlin', Mom asked. Cindy smiled and nodded her head. My mother hugged her and looking at my father said, Johnny? Dad nodded and cleared his throat and walked over to the Davises and said, Ernie, we all know how smart you are, and let's face it, the academy test will be easy for you. Which means you'll be at the academy for the next 4 years, and home on weekends if you can find the time. And a city is no place for a young family. My wife and I would like to offer you and your family a permanent home on the Zart Ranch in Loch Modan. Now, I can't tell you where the academy is, but I can tell you it's close enough you would make it to the ranch every weekend with plenty of time to see your wife and little girl for the whole weekend and not sitting on a tram. Take your time to think about it. I'm retiring today, Lord willing, and we'll be off to go buy the land and build the ranch within the next week or two. Dad said and slapped Davis on his shoulder. Well, Captain, I'll have to talk to my wife and daughter. But my vote is yes. Davis said with a huge smile. Irene kissed her husband on the cheek, then kissed Dad, and looking at Mom and Cindy still hugging, said, My vote is yes, too? Cindy? She asked. Can I take my dollhouse? Cindy asked. Grandpa Zart went over and knelt beside her. Yes, baby, and your daddy and I will build you a new room and paint it any color you like, my father said. Cindy smiled and nodded, and everyone cheered. Dad, do you have a few medals I could replace mine with on this uniform? I asked. Sure, son. What do you need? Dad asked. Marksmanship, valor, endurance, above and beyond, and the HMMH if you have one, I said. Shocked, Dad looked at Mom, and she nodded proudly. His Majesty's Medal of Honor. My son was awarded the HMMH. Did you hear that, Davis, Your Holiness? My boy, Dad said and wrapped his arm around my shoulder. The story for another time, Dad. Do you have the medals? I asked. Everything but the HMMH. Only the king has that one in my second drawer, son. I went into Dad's desk and got the medals, and Nimicie put the ribbons on my uniform as everyone took turns rehearsing what they would say if called upon. We all gathered and headed for the court and were escorted in and asked to wait. The king was then announced, and we all knelt, and he came in, a little thicker than my friend Anduin, and with shorter hair but defiantly him. Rise, His Majesty said as he sat on the throne. Captain, you ask for a private audience, yet you bring an entourage. What is going on, Captain? His Majesty asked, sounding very bored indeed. My father approached the throne and knelt. Your Majesty, the events of the past few days are going to be hard to believe, but they are the truth. My father said while knelt before the throne, Rise, Captain, and on with your story. His Majesty said. My father told his story, all of it. How I died here, how we met, how I told him how and why I was here, and the right things and bad things I've done since I've been here. The rescue of Nimicie and putting the Davises together with Cindy, his new adopted granddaughter. When he was finished, he bowed and marched over next to me and stood at attention. The king looked at me. Sergeant, so far you stand before me with tales of treason, for taking the name of a fallen hero, murder, treachery, for sneaking through my private passages and knocking out a fellow guard, and a number of dishonest behaviors not fitting of a king's guard, all veiled in a thin garb of nobility. I do not like you very much right now, Sergeant. Give me one good reason why I should not have my guards behead you on the spot. I marched to the throne and stood at attention. Your Majesty, I am Sergeant Donald Jonathan Zart of His Royal Majesty's Guard, retired. Stop, the king ordered. Why retired? He asked. Mandatory retirement at 49 for non-coms in my realm, Your Majesty. You say you're retired, yet you wear my uniform? He questioned. My father's idea, Your Majesty. He informed me this morning there is no mandatory retirement here and hoped you'd recommission me, Your Majesty. Oh, I have heard enough. Guards, ordered the king. A gasp from everyone, my father fell to his knees. Please, Your Majesty, let him finish. And just before the guards grabbed me, I ripped open my uniform and exposed the king's seal burnt into my shoulder, saying, Your Majesty! He saw it and held up his hand for the guards to stop and got up and came down the steps to the throne and stood in front of me looking at the brand. Your Majesty, my friend Anduin burned this on me before I left my realm, he said. If I would show him a signature or a magic message, he would call me a forger and a liar and lop off my head on the spot. But this he would listen to, Your Majesty, I said proudly, holding my uniform open and my head high. Your friend? His Majesty asked. Good friend, Your Majesty, like a brother, Your Majesty. I've never seen one healed before, His Majesty said. I smiled and said, That's what Anduin said, right after Valdor healed it, and he also said, It makes a handsome tattoo, I said. I was just thinking that myself, the king said. He then looked deep into my eyes for half a second, pondering whether to trust me or not, then raised his hand and waved it to have the guards return to their stations. Very well, Sergeant. Captain Rise, continue your story, he said as he headed back to his throne. I told His Majesty everything, how we met after his father fell, my role in his life as an instructor, and how he met Chili and Valdor at the academy. I told him of the many battles we stood side by side in, and our few but fun hunting trips taken with Valdor and Chili, how Valdor comes to the Zart Ranch for Winter's Festival, and when he could, he'd show up the day after and we'd do it all again, because my mother thought of him and Valdor as sons. Finally, I got to how Nimicie came into my life, and every detail that lead up to me standing in front of him today. With his position on his throne, I could tell he enjoyed the tale. Then I bowed and marched over to my father and stood at attention beside him. Valdor, you're my vizier. Is any of this possible? His Majesty asked. Entirely possible, and true. Your Majesty, I have been communicating with my other self in the sergeant's realm of Airy Peak, and the dangers he speaks of are real. I even have proof, Your Majesty, in the form of one of the assassin's diaries. Valdor read the diary, then told the king everything he knew and what we had done, at which time the king ordered a guard to take my pendant and bracer and put them on the small table beside the throne. Let's say I believe you, Sergeant. You still have what? 9 counts of murder you have to account for in my kingdom, and knocking out one of my guards, as well as exposing a secret escape tunnel. What have you to say about that? His Majesty asked. I told the king every detail of that night, how I met Davis and took out the guards, but mostly how I felt seeing the love of my life beaten, naked, and starving tied to a chair, and how after seeing that, any mercy I had left in me was gone entirely, and how exposing the tunnel and knocking out the guard, both offenses I could lose my head for, meant little to me as long as Nimicie was safe. Your Majesty, I would like to testify on that subject as well, Davis said, bowing. Come forward and announce yourself, Private, His Majesty said. Ernie came forward and bowed, then started. I am Private Ernie Davis of His Majesty's Royal Guard, formerly Corporal Davis of the City Guard, and it is in that capacity that I'd like to offer my testimony, Ernie said. The king waved his hand for Davis to continue. Davis told the king everything he knew, and emphasized how when he told me of the orphan girl, and his predictions even gave His Majesty the blood-stained bear toy, and how I offered him a better opportunity to improve his life and home. I was kind of worried how he worded his testimony. To me, it almost sounded like it was a bribe instead of following through with an idea and then adding a bonus to it. But he managed to pull it back out of the fire when he told of the help my father and I gave him and how he owed us everything because of how much he loves his new daughter. After Davis spoke, then it was Irene and then finally my mother. She told him of my love for Nimicie and told him it was her that gave me a beating and told me to find that girl, fall to her feet, and beg her forgiveness. His Majesty's final questions to her were of his counter self, and if he did indeed go to her ranch mostly every winter's festival. Being dwarf mom was never one to hold punches, or tact for that matter, and told His Majesty the story of how in his 3rd year at the academy I brought him home for winter festival, and he found herd. Still and helped himself, and how she found him drunk as a skunk in the shed, with 2 longhorn sheep licking his face. Knowing he had a parade the next day, she brought him into the house, put a bucket beside his bed, and keep feeding him coffee, and toweling his head, and then when sober enough gave him a good scrubbing and had him ready. By the time I woke up, never the wiser, he was ever drunk. But to this day, if she knows His Majesty is coming to the ranch, she'll put a lock on the still. My mother's final words to him, I still remember. Your Majesty, Anduin, you may be a wee bit thicker, and your hair shorter, but that's still the face I love to squeeze when I can. Mom said, and bowed. Before I make my ruling, is there anyone else to testify on behalf of the sergeant? The king asked. Cindy slowly put up her tiny hand. You, little one, what is your name? The king asked. Cindy, sir? King, sir. Cindy, come here, child. The king said, gently smiling and waving her to the throne. Holding Irene's hand, Cindy started walking to the throne and stopped just at the stairs in front. You are such a brave girl, Cindy. What would you like to say? His Majesty asked. I have something to tell you and to show you, please, Sir King, Cindy asked. Of course, child. Cindy let go of Irene's hand and came and stood beside me and took my hand. Uncle Donnie killed my daddy, but my daddy did very bad things and drank a lot. Then she ran and got Davis, took his hand and pulled him over to stand beside me and my father, then went and got Nimicie and pulled her in front of us 3. Aunt Nimicie said to Daddy Davis, Uncle Donnie, and Grandpa Zart. She ran in front of the king and waved her finger and in a deep voice said, You 3 have 2 skins of ale to share, and if you have more, you'll have to answer to me. Cindy imitated, then stood straight and tall and said, and all 3 said. And she shouted, Yes, Mum. Then she ran back to Davis and me and pulled us closer to His Majesty, who was trying to hide a grin. When Daddy Davis told Uncle Donnie about me, Uncle Donnie said he would pay the fee if Daddy Davis would adopt me and would have Grandpa Zart give him a better job. Cindy pushed me back where I was and grabbed my father and pulled him next to Davis and grabbed Irene and put her on the other side of Davis. Then stood in front of His Majesty and said, When Grandpa Zart came into the orphanage with my new mommy and Daddy Davis, Grandpa Zart said, and again, waving her finger and talking in a deep voice, that child is not spending another day feeling unloved and unwanted. She is going home with my private and his loving wife, today. Cindy imitated. I gave a surprised look to my father, a part of the story I never heard. Cindy then took Dad and pushed him back beside me, then ran up the 3 steps beside the king, who now had his hand over his mouth, hiding a huge smile, and shook her finger again, this time impersonating the king. Well, he must have loved her. He was carving a toy for the child, she said, waving her finger and bobbing her head. His Majesty cleared his throat to keep from laughing. She then walked down the stairs and turned to the king. Can I show you what the toy was really for? Cindy asked. Yes, sweetheart, of course, His Majesty said. May I have it, please, King, sir? She asked. Irene spoke, saying, Oh, sweetie, you don't want to touch that has blood on it. His Majesty took the toy and a hanky from his sleeve and wrapped the part of the toy bare that had bloodstains and held it out for Cindy, saying, Here, child, hold it by the hanky. Cindy looked at Irene, and Irene nodded. Then Cindy went and took the toy. Thank you, King. Sir, Your hanky is soft. She took the toy and ran up to Davis and pulled him into the center of the court so all could see. Daddy Davis, hold your arm like you have a bag with wine bottles and you are just coming out of the wine store, she asked. Davis did as she asked. She took 5 steps away and balled up her fist and looked at everyone. I have a broken bag in this hand, she said, then started crying loudly and ran up to Davis, tugging violently on his pant leg, holding her balled-up fist up to him and with tears streaming down her face, crying, Please, sir, my bag broke, and my daddy's wine broke. If I go home with no wine, he'll beat me. Please, sir, a bottle of wine. Please, he'll beat me hard. Please, I'll give you my toy, she said as she held up the toy bear to Davis. Davis, completely forgetting where he was and in front of the king and everyone, looked at me with tears in his eyes and said, That son of a bitch. Cindy stopped crying and went up in front of the king and said, Sometimes the men would take the toy, King Sir, and my daddy would have to carve another after he drank his wine, Cindy explained. Again, Davis, with tears streaming down his face, forgot where he was and said to me, You should have gouged out his eyes and cut off his ball. Ernie, Irene shouted. Davis looked around and realized where he was, knelt to the floor, saying, Sorry, Your Majesty, I forgot myself. 1,000 pardons, he begged. Quite understandable. Private, rise, please, His Majesty squeaked out while swallowing a lump in his throat. My new mommy and Daddy Davis may drink, but only a little, and Uncle Donnie, Aunt Nimicie, and Grandpa Zart gave me a new home, a good home, and a real dollhouse, so I will always love them. She then looked down at the toy bear and threw it to the ground and stomped on it. I hate drunk daddy's toys, she barked. Irene ran over to her and picked her up with tears in her eyes. So sorry, Your Majesty, Irene said and curtsied, then turned holding her daughter, saying, Mommy will never drink again, baby. Never again. There was not a dry eye in the court. Davis picked the toy and hanky and bowing handed it back to His Majesty, who took it and used the hanky to wipe his eyes, then said, I think I'm going to keep this little bear. There's a lesson in it for all of us. Holding the bear and with his other hand, reached across himself and picked up the pendant and bracer. Then he stood. His Majesty needs half an hour of quiet deliberation in his den. Everyone will remain here. He ordered, came down the stairs, looked at me, and held up the bear. What Davis was about to say, Sergeant, he said to me and nodded, then walked out as we all knelt. The half hour His Majesty took in deliberation was the longest of my life. Even though everyone thought it went well and noticed how many times the king was on the edge of his seat, especially during Davis's reenactment of my rescue of Nimicie, but we all agreed Cindy was the hero of the day, and I even teased Davis, saying he'd better start saving now. Law school is expensive. Davis laughed and picked up Cindy. Are you going to be a lawyer, Cindy? He asked, smiling. What's a lawyer? Cindy asked. Laughing, I said, a poker player who is better paid. I then spent a few moments in Nimicie's arms just in case of the worst. I hugged everyone as they wished me luck, and we all resumed our places just as His Majesty was announced. His Majesty walked in, and we all knelt, and just as he hit the stairs, he turned and said, Rise, and we all rose. And he stepped in front of me, pointing to the throne. Before I go up there, Sergeant, I have a few questions. 1. Is it your intent to make this realm, this Azeroth, your home? His Majesty asked. Yes, Your Majesty. My family is here. Their families are here. This will be my home if I'm allowed, I said. He nodded. 2. Despite your retirement, do you feel you have never left the King's Guard? His Majesty asked. I gave an oath many years ago to be a King's Guard in this life and the next, and I might add, it was His Majesty Anduin Wrynn who gave me the order to rescue the girl, kill the assassins, destroy the pendants, and live happily ever after in my new realm. After my retirement, Your Majesty, I said. The king nodded and ran up to the throne and sat down. We shall address the charges first, exposing a secret security passage. The only one who knows it, and knows where it is the sergeant. And thanks to the good captain bringing you all in on a private meeting with the king, you are all bound to the private security laws, so no breach has been made. Charge dismissed. As for the misconduct charge of knocking out a guard, the sergeant will apologize and pay for the cleaning of the guard's uniform, as well as token retribution not to exceed 20 gold to the guard himself. Take him out for a nice steak dinner. Charge dismissed. And Captain, the offense will be removed from the guard's record. I would also advise Valdor to do the same as the sergeant for his involvement. Now, as for the murder charges, as the sergeant believed himself working under orders, and just now in private conversation requested to be considered for the King's Guard Swift Justice Act, which he was granted, charges dismissed. Sergeant Major Donald Jonathan Zart is reinstated to his Royal Majesty's Guard, effective immediately at regular pay for his rank, and no retribution for lost time, but you can keep the watch. Now, Sergeant, in a lot of ways, I am a small man, and that being said, I can't help but feel cheated out of what should have been a guiding hand and great friendship. And listening to your stories of deeds and battles, I feel this Azeroth has been cheated as well. So your primary order is to have this document signed, or a seal from each leading house in each fraction of our alliance. A great deed or extraordinary act of bravery must be done, by you, for each of the alliance fractions of Azeroth. Then, and only then, you will become a citizen of Azeroth and have the right to vote, marry, own land, and pay taxes, even though Kingsguards don't pay taxes, but no matter. Meaning, if you want to get married to that fiancée of yours and buy her a house, I'd get your ass in gear, and start questing for all our fractions to get those seals. You are free to come and go between realms as needed, but taking anyone with you or bringing anyone here must be cleared through me first. And Miss Nimicie, no more stealing pendants for any reason. Mrs. Zart, welcome to Azeroth. Sergeant, come get your pendant and bracer and orders. Cindy Davis, would you approach the throne with your parents, please? The king finished. The Davises approached the throne. Cindy, your little bear is going to remain on my desk as a lesson that not all is as appears. Thank you for that. Also, if your father is accepted for the academy, you will have the option of going as well as his ward when you are old enough. However, I would like to offer an alternative. Should Cindy Davis grow up and have the grades to be accepted by the University of Law, she would enter as ward of the crown. Means, Cindy, if you choose law school, I'll pay for it. His Majesty said, smiling. Thank you, Your Majesty. From the Davis family. Is there any other business here today before I fill my grumbling tummy? The king asked. Your Majesty? My father said as he stepped forward. Yes, Captain. From the king. Your Majesty, I should like to request an immediate retirement for myself. I owe 30-some years of affection to my estranged wife, and should like paying it off as soon as possible. My father said, standing at attention. You're giving my paymaster quite the advantage on your severance, you know. The king stated. If it pleases your Majesty, I don't care about the money. Time is much more important at my age. My father said, You will finish the day and clean that guard's record. Who would you suggest as your replacement captain? The king asked, coming down the stairs to shake my father's hand. Your Majesty Major Moresby has an excellent rapport with the men, sir, and I would think would welcome the change from supply, Your Majesty. My father said. The king took Dad's hand and shook it hard and said, You will be missed, Captain. Come to see me tomorrow for your watch. I wish to have it inscribed with a personal message. His Majesty said, Yes, Your Majesty. My father said with a smile. And so all turned out well for everyone, and I had a new home and purpose. I would miss my friends Valdor and Anduin, Kylie and the Floggins, Stevens and Roberts, Captain Parker and Captain Niles. But I had my family, my whole family together again, and a new world to discover and quest in with more adventures to come along the way. But it did make me realize something, how much Chili was a part of my life and how much I needed him. I wondered if almost everything else was the same. What were the chances Mangleclaw would still be roaming the mountains of Dun Morog, and if so, even under his curse, so never aged? A young Chili would be an asset to our quest. The king had sent me on, and we'd get those orders of mine done quick so we could be married. I would talk it over back at the apartment with Nimicie and Mom and Dad. How I needed to find Chili, and everyone agreed it would be best to, or at least try. So I put on my armor, grabbed all my arrows, and rummaged through my riding pouch for my fast black horse mount, kissed everyone, and said my goodbyes. Going outside to call my mount, Nimicie came up beside me and kissed me. Do you think you'll be long? She asked. You stay here and get our affairs in order. If we're going to be questing for the king and chasing those 2 realm-shifting assassins, I need my best friend. Who is your best friend, darling? You don't know anyone here, Nimicie asked as she followed behind me quickly. I've got to go find Mangleclaw. I'll be back in a week or two. I love you, I said as I mounted my horse. I love you too, but Mangleclaw is a myth, a dwarven legend. What, you're chasing legends now? She scoffed with her arms crossed. Wrong, I said and leaned in close to her. Mangleclaw is chilly. Hee-yaw! And my horse and I took off like a shot. She caught up with me, just outside Stormwind, riding a beautiful white stallion bareback at full gallop, and stayed right at my side till we reached Lakeshire, where we would stop for the night. As we rode, I smiled at her, and that's when I knew Nimicie would always be at my side, no matter the danger, no matter the quest. She would be right there, and for the rest of our lives. And that's when I realized I had indeed stumbled onto my destiny. The end.